Hello everyone, my name is Daisy, and today I'm going to be teaching you how to make boss themes, battle themes, and yeah. So in this video, I'm going to be using my Acts of Justice track, which I uploaded on my channel. If you want to watch it on its own, it'll be linked in the description. Along with that, there will also be the FLP file. So, you'll have that, and if you want to study it, you can. Fair warning though, I'm not an expert when it comes to making music. My knowledge is of course limited. I'm not a perfect musician or anything, but I think if you're a beginner, it could be useful if you want to study that. But yeah, to begin, we're gonna get started with the bass. I just used the bass from Versus Susie and kind of switch things up. The first two notes here, they continue to go down a note every repeat. That's what Megalovania does. That's what Sunsetter does. That's a Homestuck track that Toby Fox made. And it's a good way to make this very short, simple melody have some variation to it, while still sounding basically the same. So I'll let the bass play on its own. Yeah, Toby, he likes to do this thing where the song kind of starts off with a bass, and as it progresses, it kind of builds up, and then you get to the melody and the drums and all the good stuff. But the build-up is one of the most important things, because without the build-up, this part of the song wouldn't be as impactful. So that's just something to keep in mind. And then here, I try to make it more interesting by adding some support to my bass. So I add the Megalovania bass guitar to make it sound more interesting. And then when you stack them on top of each other, it sounds like this. Me personally, I think that sounds pretty cool. And then builds up, you kind of get the melody, it's the normal melody that you get in Versus Susie. I will add one thing though. So normally in Versus Susie, there isn't this many slide notes. The reason I added slide notes here is because the emotion I wanted to convey with this track is like Susie kind of feels betrayed in a sense. So her emotions are kind of going all over the place. So with the notes, I kind of wanted to reflect that by making the notes go all over the place. They're just sliding everywhere. So that's just kind of what they sound like here. It's a good way of making your notes have a specific feel to them. And as we get here, it kind of builds up. And another thing Toby likes to do, he likes to have a very cool like transitional part that then goes into the, to the drop. So that sounds pretty cool, right? So it sounds like this. I tried to implement that into this track, just have a cool transition. The drums here, you might notice, I used the drums from Megalovania. The reason I did that is because when I first started making this song, I thought it would be like a Susie Megalovania before I made it into my own thing, but also because the drums for Megalovania sound pretty damn good. Those drums, those are really powerful drums. So I wanted to use them. This drum specifically is a very good like transitional drum where you want to emphasize a certain part of the song. You have this drum here and kind of emphasizes it. And I just think it kind of sounds cool. I got a few comments saying that they felt like the drums were too quiet. I think a lot of it could just be people listening on their phone with no like headphones on. I think on headphones it sounds better, but of course, again, I'm not a perfect musician or anything. And if you think the drums are an issue, with the FLP file I release, you can turn up the volume on those if you so wish. So yeah, that's all I really have to say about the drums. The drums I didn't really spend much effort on, because they're not my drums, they're Toby's. but they sound really good. I'm not an expert when it comes to drums. There are plenty of good videos out there that cover drums, but I don't think I'm qualified to give much advice on that. I kind of have it build up here, and then I use the bass, which the bass in itself is kind of already a melody, but I add an instrument to the bass, I add some brass, and I add squid font orchestral instrument to it, which are instruments that Toby uses for Megalovania specifically. A lot of Megalovania influence in this one, as you can tell. It just kind of makes things sound cool. Layering instruments can also be a very powerful thing. It can kind of emphasize the melody of your songs and make them sound more powerful, and like it's a big concert band playing it or something. I don't know. It sounds cool. So, but enough of that. You get to this part, sounds mostly the same, and then when you get here, so Toby also likes to do this thing where before the section of the song is even over, he makes the melody transition into the next part. So you get the dun 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 dun, like you get that before it even gets here. And that just kind of makes it sound very natural. It kind of makes you anticipated for the next part of the song. For Toby tracks, he likes to have these kind of more emotional segments that have less instruments to them. I used these drums from the Smash version of Megalovania. They're more quiet and they're not as fast, I guess. And they just kind of play here. The bass is gone, and the chords are here. Makes you mostly focus on the emotion of the melody here. These are important if you want to sound like Toby Fox, having these kind of emotional moments in your battle theme. Of course, it depends on the type of theme you're making. If it's for a more goofy character, then you might not want to do this. But for Susie specifically, who is a character with a lot of different, for the song at least, has a lot of different emotions going through her head, I feel like having a more emotional part of the song to emphasize that would be a good choice to do. And depending on the context of your track, can be very impactful. And of course, the emotional part, I do the transitional drums here, and it replays the melody, except now there's more instruments like before. So, all emotional, and then it goes to emotional, but also goes really hard. And I added the Noelle leitmotif to it because that's a character that's very closely associated with Susie. That's her girlfriend, basically. So I figured it would be fitting. And yeah, so here's how it sounds. The chords, actually, I should probably talk about those. So I used the chords from Versus Susie. Chords are also very, impactful to a track. So it's what the chords sound like on their own. So I felt like for the chords anyway, I made it a piano stacked with a string, and the string is panned, I believe, to the right, to the left, I think. And the piano is also panned to the right instead of the left. Hopefully I'm making sense. But they're panned opposite ways, and it kind of makes this more like, I don't know if I want to say dissonant, but it makes it sound more I guess, out of this world, you know? So there you go. When it comes to chord progressions, this is the thing Toby likes to do. He likes to, I don't want to say steal, but he gets inspired by games that he likes for his chord progressions. So, you know, Cave Story, Earthbound, that kind of thing. Basically kind of study the chord progressions to those. And I think something that's very important to keep in mind when making music is that nobody owns a chord progression. No one owns a bass, you know, they don't own that. So if you see a chord progression that you really like, you know, as long as you make the song your own unique thing, I don't think there's really much of a problem when it comes to, I guess, taking those chords. Yeah, as long as you make it your own thing and don't just steal off other people's music. But yeah, that's kind of my advice for chords. Just, it's one of those things where you just gotta, you fuck with it until it sounds good. A trick that Toby uses in Black Knife, which he also uses in Versus Susie, is he makes the like song sound very dissonant, which basically means like the notes are very close to each other, like this note and this note right on top of each other, right? And on its own, it would sound not so great. That doesn't sound good, right? Like it sounds like the notes are clashing, if you will. But when you add all these other notes, it sounds pretty damn good. And the reason why Toby does this, or why really any musician would do this, is to kind of evoke a like chaotic feeling within your track, where, you know, it just makes your track sound like it's going crazy. Like there's a lot going on. Or I guess in this context, it would be, you know, the notes are clashing. So using music theory here for a second, you know, the notes are clashing, like how the character that this music is for is clashing with their emotions, if that makes sense. So dissonance, very cool thing, if used properly. If not, then it kind of sounds like crap, but I hope that's at least somewhat useful. But yeah, so chords, that's that. This part kind of continues going on, and then we get to this another emotional part of the song, where I use the Hammer of Justice motif with Gerson, because Gerson, very close character to Susie, so I felt like it was only appropriate. So it's like, okay, so music theory time. So it builds up here, right? The banjo is basically, you know, it's Gerson's instrument. It's an instrument heavily tied with Gerson, not for any like particular story reason, but because, you know, Gerson's motifs, they like to use banjos because he's an old man. And I guess you kind of associate the two. So, you know, this part to me would be like Susie kind of remembering her time with Gerson. And then here, it's that same motif, but it uses Susie's guitar. It's like she's using what she learned from Gerson and applying it to her situation, you know, which I think is kind of cool. I don't know. And I use the same chords as before. The reason I love those chords so much is because they're really damn beautiful sounding. So I use the same chords from before. I also add a trumpet instrument layered on top of the guitar, because that's what's used in Spear of Justice with Undyne. So I figured it would only be fitting if I used the trumpet in this song to kind of evoke a similar feeling. A friend of mine put this in a really good way. It's like the song sounds like you're being punched in the face, like heroically, um, which is what Toby was going for with Spirit Justice, and is what I wanted to go for with uh, Acts of Justice, if that makes sense. So here's just kind of what that sounds like on its own. Okay, so on the repeated section of this song, how are we going to make this more interesting? Like, how are we going to make this more hype? How are we going to add more hype moments and word to this one? Well, for one, I brought the banjo back. I just thought it'd be cool to add the banjo back. Also, just because I like how the banjo sounds. And I also added the brass instrument, as well as the squid font orchestral instrument, like I did before. So this is what it sounds like. If you hear like crackling sounds, that's not because of the song. It's because of OBS. FL Studio really does not like it when you use OBS because it uses a shit ton of memory and it causes those little crackling sounds. So my apologies for that. Regardless though, that's kind of the root of the song. Now, something else I want to go over real quick. So with the bass, so this is the bass progression in normal Hammer of Justice. And I just stacked it on top of the bass of Versus Susie. And you wouldn't think that it would sound good or fit really, but it actually works surprisingly well. That might kind of sound like a mess on its own, but when put with the rest of the song, I feel like it adds a lot of energy to it. That really like evokes this sense of emotion to the song. I think that's just something to keep in mind when making music is, you don't need to follow strict rules. You don't need to just have one bass line. You can have two bass lines that kind of counteract each other. You can have two counter melodies, There's not really any strict rules when it comes to making music. So yeah, key points that I want to get across. This is important. So the key points, start off with a basic kind of bass progression, build on that bass progression while adding, maybe adding something else to it for more variation. And then the beat drop happens and it goes crazy hard. Have an emotional part of your song, that relates to whatever emotion you're trying to give off with the track. Then repeat that melody and, make it go hard, like before. After that, of course, this can be different depending on what style of battle theme you're trying to emulate. This is more trying to be like Megalovania, I suppose. But yeah, after this, another emotional segment, and then it goes hard again, and it ends off with a bang. If you're using your songs for a game, I think it's important to make sure that it loops properly. The way I did this is by making the last notes the bass, and then so when it loops, it goes back to the bass again, and it feels pretty seamless. But yeah, so basic bass build up to melody to beat drop, and then emotional moment, and then another beat drop. I hope that makes sense. Of course, you don't have to follow any strict rules when it comes to making battle themes, but it's a very good formula that Toby likes to use. And yeah, I'd say it goes pretty hard. So I hope that basically covered it. Some more general advice I like to give is repetition and variation, very important. repeat the same things over and over again to kind of get the melody stuck in your head, while also adding variation to it, to make sure it doesn't get boring. You know, I went over the example of the bass, but that also applies to like melodies. You know, you have the melody, and then on the repeat of that melody, you make it sound a little different. You know, um, I kind of went over more of this in my piano and 8-bit tracks tutorial. So if you want to learn more about that specifically, I would recommend that. But that's just kind of more general advice. Um, but yeah, I hope that about covers it. If you want to listen to the full song, it's, you know, in the description. If you want to download the FLP, you know, maybe you want to make a cover for it, or you just want to study it. Uh, yeah, that's in the description. So, and if you do make a cover, feel free to tag me so that I see it, because that'd be very awesome. Um, but yeah, I hope what I said was clear. I hope all of you have a good day. So, see ya.